Hello, I wanted to do a really quick overview of the importance and the key points of effective compliance training. I've worked in a couple of different organisations that have lots of compliance and mandatory training. I know many learning development professionals have been in the same situation, and it's something that is not always fun to organise. There's the association that is tick boxy and so on. But actually, if you get the structure right and get your framework right, then it doesn't have to be a headache at all. So I just wanted to share all the things I've kind of learnt over the years on compliance training. So the first point to start with is always to remember, what is the purpose? Why do we have compliance training? And actually, before I get into the why, I just want to say there's two kinds, isn't there? So there's compliance training, which I used to define as legal compliance, as something where there's a law, there's a regulation, might be something to do with your sector. There's a legal element to the training need. And then there's mandatory training, which there isn't necessarily a legal need, but it's what the organization deems as mandatory. So it might be they want everyone to do the induction, the background of the company within the first week or something like that. And I know that at times, there's debate about, well, how do those sit together? I would actually just put them all together. It doesn't matter if it's compliance or a compliance requirement or a mandatory organizational requirement, just treat them the same, because either way, the organization is saying people need to do it. So yeah, the why, and I just really wanted to emphasize this point. I think it's so important to start with, why the organization needs to do any of these trainings. And the bottom line is these trainings are there to protect the organization and to protect the employees, to protect the individuals. So starting from that point of, how can this training help protect an employee or to help protect the business is always the best place to start from. So I've jotted down my thoughts, and really there's three key elements to putting together a compliance training framework. And it's the what, the how, and the who. I shall actually do it the other way around. So it's the what, the who, and then the how. So if we start with the what, now this is very interesting because, what to include. It's all very well saying everybody needs training on X or everybody needs training on Y. But then if someone's got to put that training together, there's an exercise there to work out exactly what's in it. And if you're in a training team, if you're responsible for designing training or commissioning training, that can feel like a big weight on your shoulders, like what exactly needs to be covered, and actually isn't really the remit of the training department, the learning development department, to always scope out what the training needs to cover. So, but what I will say is, you can go to, I just remember many instances of working, in a business, and you'd go to, if it was health and safety training, you'd go to the health and safety expert and say, okay, what needs to be in, and they'd say, well, what's in the legislation? And then you go and look at the legislation, and it doesn't give you a course outline. It doesn't give you a specific list. It will just say employees need to be trained regularly in and just give you the headline. So actually, the legislation itself isn't always prescriptive, but what I would say is check for your particular thing, whatever you're looking at, look at the legislation, look at any guidance. If it's health and safety, go to the health and safety executive. So do your homework. But the point is, there will be a point where you have to take, what's out there, what's being required, and you will have to make a judgment call. Someone will have to make a judgment call about what is right for your organization based on the risks that your people face, the kinds of jobs they do. So it's about using judgment. It might be for some things, if you're a big organization and there's like lots of heavy topics, that you get a panel of people together and agree the curriculum and agree what's in it and what's not in it. Some organizations do that. They have like a compliance board to make these decisions. So that's starting with the what. The next thing I would say, but yeah, just going back to the what again, I would say that always go from the point of what do the people doing the jobs, doing the work need to know? What do they need to know? Do they need to know, you know, loads of background and legal things, or do they just need to know the practical situations they're going to encounter? And I would always go for the practical. Obviously, people need a bit of background. Anyway, so that's the what. Then if we talk about the who, and again, similar point here, no legal document will say which groups of your employees will need which training. You will still need to work that out. And this, I think this is probably the area that can be contentious in lots of organizations. What I've done in my previous roles is to create like a framework and to divide, you know, the employees up into different groups and to work out what training is needed by which group. And there's different ways of doing that. Your organization might already have some classification system in place which you can use. Quite often the kinds of groupings that HR have already come up with don't always map exactly to what the training needs are. So it's not an exact science. So what you'll need to do is you might need to add in an extra classification layer. And I'll give you an example of that in just a minute. But what I would say is, to get to that point, to come up with the right framework, you need to understand what the patterns of needs are. So if you talk to all of your, talk to as many people as you can about what's happened historically, about where there are disagreements and where there are flashpoints, why are those there? And just, look at if managers have requested training, compliance training that hasn't been in place, you need to kind of understand the big picture. And once you've got that overview, and you might need to get several people's heads together, then you can have a go at creating your own framework or classification system. So I'll just give an example of one that I used, that I came up with, or my team came up with. As I say, it was a team effort. So I worked for one organization and there wasn't any kind of classification system beyond some categories that were used by HR. So we had to evolve that. So we came up with two sort of classifications. We came up with job families, and there was about 8 different families in the job families, and it was things like director, head of service, middle manager, team manager. But then we added some extra ones. So remote workers, so people that weren't office based, or remote operatives or remote carers, because that was the type of business that we were. So we had to specify when they were people that did not sit behind a computer as part of their regular day job, because they had different training needs, because we knew what work they were doing. They were going into people's homes or repairing things on people's homes. So that was the job families. Then in addition, there was another classification which we called job roles. So this was different again. So this was things like, were they a specialist? So they weren't a manager and they weren't admin, but they were a specialist. We had an admin job role. We had a trade operative job role. We had a care and support job role. So it might look at it on the face of it that there was some of the categories were similar to the job families, and they were, but we had different reasons for having 2 different frameworks. So if we wanted just to send some guidance to everyone that was remote, or some compliance training to everyone that was remote, then we could use the job family categories. If we wanted to send something to everyone that was a maintenance worker, we would use the job roles category to do that. So you really have to kind of map out everything that might be needed to come up with the right framework for you. So it can be a tricky piece of work, but once it's done, that can give you the foundation for then allocating the training. So the next point then is how. So how do you deliver your compliance training? And within how, there's several different elements. There's how often, which is a big one, and then there's how you're going to deliver it, and then there's how you're going to manage it. So 3 things in how. In terms of how often, again, this one is, you know, you have to use judgment. So it's looking at, you know, it's looking at the needs of the people doing the jobs. They, you know, are they going to have initial training, and are they going to then have some refreshers? How often do they need to have a refresher? And you really want agreement on this. So if you've got a particular job role or job family, whichever type of thing you're using, you need agreement from all the managers of all their people in that group, because you don't want one saying, well, I want my people to have it every year, and someone else say, I want it every 6 months. Literally just get them in the same room and say, well, we can only put in one rule for this whole group, and it's got to be the same. Otherwise we can't automate it in our system, because that's what it's all about. It's all about being able to automate the process through your learning management system so that you can report, because you can't report on things if it's not defined. So yes, so how often? The other thing to think about with how often is to think about capacity. So if you've got an organization and they're trying to get up to date with their compliance training, and they're like, yeah, we'll just send out a new topic every month, then, you know, 3 or 4 months in, employees are going to be fed up of getting this mandated training every month. So just try to be realistic. If you're doing a big rollout of new content, just be realistic and don't do it all at once, and prioritize. So that's the how often. How to deliver. Okay, this is a huge one. I mean, I could do a whole thing talking about this. E-learning is very popular for compliance training because people can do it at a time that suits them. You can track it, which means you can report on it. However, there is good and bad e-learning. So just be aware of that. And it's not the only way. So other ways that you could use, you could use job aids. So sending out, you know, a PDF, a reminder. You could use manager briefings. So if you have an organization where your managers, you know, have a team meeting every month, you could set a program like every month there's a different compliance training that they are, and you give the manager a briefing sheet with some background, some slides, and then the manager can then relate that particular topic to the needs of the audience. And then to capture the records, you just get everyone that's there to sign a piece of paper, manager takes a picture, sends it back to you, and you've got your audit trail. So that's just another idea. Also, if you are going to use e-learning, then, you know, try to be smart about it. People are fed up of just clicking through loads of things. If you're going to have a quiz at the end, maybe put a quiz at the beginning. And if people get full marks straight away, they don't have to do the whole training or something. So, you know, try to be a bit intuitive so that it's not completely, you know, something you have to just go through if you already got the knowledge that you need. So that's a little bit on delivery. Oh yeah, just one more thing on how to deliver. If you are going to require people to do like an annual, you know, the same training every year, then please vary it. Don't make them just do exactly the same module every year, because they won't be pleased with you. So yeah, just vary it. And there's lots of ways to do that. And if you have a training team, they can help you with that. I would probably say start with, you know, one size fits all to get everyone up to standard. And then for your freshers, then you could use the manager's briefing, because they will adapt it and tweak it to the audience. So the final element of the how-to is how to manage. So yeah, I've mentioned learning management systems. I hope you've got one. It makes managing compliance training much easier. You can automate, you know, reminders and triggers. You know, record keeping is really important with compliance training. You need your records. You'll need your records to keep them many years after people have left, because there are certain things, particularly in health and safety, things like asbestos, you know, claims can come up many years after employees have left. So, you know, record keeping is important. I would say reporting, you want to make that as easy as possible. So that's why having all those parameters of exactly who and exactly how often and exactly what, you need all those parameters up front to be able to generate nice, clear reports. Reporting is another whole thing we could talk about, but I would just say, you know, I've had to do reports and graphs and take them to meetings and things, and sometimes when people take data out of the system, it's just data, and you have to really think, how am I going to make this tell a story, and how am I going to actually paint the picture of what's going on. So, you know, just always, you don't have to be a mathematician or a statistician, you just need to kind of use common sense in looking at the information that you're presenting. Anyway, that's a whistle-stop tour through compliance training, and I hope that's useful.